Oh, that one. Okay,
It's got all four of us.
so don't even pay attention to it. So y'all have the cameras?
Well, I told you we got to get another camera.
Alex.
Somebody's got to.
We have a 35 millimeter
Somebody
lens.
has to lead this whole operation. So welcome today to Hope for the Soul.
Oh, you're going. Okay.
We're glad to have you joining with us on our normal Friday moment when we come and spend a few minutes with you and you choose to spend some time with us. Happy to see you today. Today, Kayla has a joke for us, and she promises it will be one that we can understand.
Y'all, my joke last week was phenomenal. They just didn't get it.
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay, this is in honor of fall because we had our first fall crisp morning yesterday and today.
It was so good.
So why did the Scarecrow win the Nobel Peace Prize?
Why is that?
Because he was outstanding in his field.
I can understand it. At least we could understand it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know about the quality, but at least we all laughed at that one.
Okay, why did the apple pie cry?
Why is that?
Its peelings were hurt.
That's a good one. That's a dead joke.
Happy fall.
Happy fall, y'all.
Did you notice that yesterday Pastor Trent likes to be young, strong, but he had a jacket on all day long, and it was zipped all the way to his
up.
chin.
Yep.
I was cold yesterday. And the worst part about it, so the jacket worked, but the shoes I was wearing, I guess they're cheaper, probably are cheap, and my feet were freezing all day long. So today I'm wearing shoes that'll keep my feet warm.
Probably with no socks. You do it.
I've got socks. They're no-show socks.
like that's no socks. You need the man of God socks.
The knee-high gold toe.
hose.
You need some good
The
man of
hose.
God
The
socks.
pantyhose socks
There
that
you
you can
go.
see through.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, I'm happy to see you today.
Yeah, let's pick on Alex now. We picked on everybody. Alex, it's your turn.
Alex is perfect.
She is.
No, literally, Alex is kind of holding our loose ends together, and I'm thankful for that. A few days ago, we were all visiting, and Alex had presented with us a series of questions, and then we ran out of time. And I think that we went that an hour and 10 minutes in that podcast.
We were
So before we
long-winded.
go any further, like and subscribe, and touch that button and help us out and share us with somebody. And please also note, those of you that follow this podcast, again, I'm carrying the entire workload here, but welcome. And Alex, fire away at us.
So we had a couple questions remaining from last, I guess, 2 times ago. How do you balance being authentic to yourself while maintaining a leadership role in the church? An example is like living in a glass house.
I like it. Who wants to go first?
Am I supposed to answer that?
You go first, Deb.
Okay. First off, this whole being authentic, I think that a younger generation puts a lot of emphasis on that, and because there's certain things from my perspective that millennials and then Gen Zers, that they just don't put value on certain things as previous generations did. For instance, previous generations, boomers and whatever came between all these other generational titles, it seems as if that my generation places much emphasis on positions. They place much emphasis on holding the authority, and many times they place much emphasis on being in control, using that authority. And so many times in my generation, I've seen develop what I call a Messiah complex. There's probably some incredible psychological, studied out, defined term that encompasses this, but many times I've heard people of my generation quote Paul in the New Testament when he says, "I am all things to all men," interpreting or misinterpreting, depending on your perspective, that in their position they feel the need to be everything to everybody. For instance, a pastor, And I found myself in this position. I've had to be banker. I've had to be lawyer. I've had to be doctor. I've had to be all those things at different times to people. And sometimes I found myself trying to do them all at one time. When in all reality, no person, no pastor, no leader can be all things to all men. I think we've got to be careful not to think more highly of ourselves than we ought. And so your question of authenticity, I think that we have to learn how to not overemphasize our own self-importance. At the same time, we've also got to be honest and candid with ourselves and be self-aware. That's a great term, to be self-aware enough of who we are, what we are, that indeed God has called us, and indeed God puts us in the places that we are. And if God placed us in the place that we find ourselves, now if we've manipulated our way to that position or to that place of authority, then it's not a God thing, okay? And if we've manipulated or maneuvered our way to certain things, then we will be defined by our continued manipulation and maneuvering, because that's what got us there, and so that's what will keep us there. But if God places us in positions, if God places us leading a certain group, if God places us over something, I think that we've got to be very aware that God's done this, and if God's done this, he will equip. I mean, he doesn't necessarily call the equipped, but he equips those he calls. Does that make sense? So when you ask the term of being authentic to yourself, I think that we've got to understand what our gifts and our callings are. We've got to recognize those strengths. And then we don't need to put more emphasis on who and what we are, because then I think we leave that authentic thing, and then we enter into where we're something bigger than life, and then there's more. I've observed people whom think that theirs is the only horn that is tooting at the time. And in all reality, we are part of a huge, huge thing. This life that we live is part of huge, and we are but a small piece. And in our individual ponds, we may have the privilege of being the big fish in a little pond. But once we jump out of the little pond into a pond that's just a little bit larger than ours, suddenly we realize we're just one of the fish. And that's hard to accept when you like being the big fish. And then if we're not careful, we start thinking maybe even two things. We can think more highly of ourselves than we ought, and then also we can think less of ourselves than we ought.
That's good. I think pride and insecurity, or I guess pride and insecurity, they're both two sides of the same coin. And I also think, so going back to your question, Alex, how to be true to yourself in ministry while living in a glass house. I think first you have to be who God made you to be. There's only one Alex. There's only one R. Kent Smith. There's only one Kayla. There's only one Trent. And the second we try to be someone else is the second that not only do we do ourselves a disservice, but we do the people around us a disservice, and we do God a disservice, because that's saying that we don't accept the fact that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And being in the glass house, it isn't easy. All of us at this table now live in a glass house. Alex, welcome to the world of a glass house. You're new to it. Well, not really, because you've been in Bible school, but as far as in the local church context, it's not easy, but it gets easier whenever you recognize that I'm going to be submitted to God, and I'm going to be the same. For instance, where we're going to be the same at Conroe Church as we are on vacation. We might let our hair down. We might laugh. We might tell jokes. We might be able to relax and let our guard down, but we don't let our character down. I think that's very important. Whenever you see people who aren't authentic, it's because there's probably a character issue somewhere. And authenticity is huge. Dad, you mentioned that your generation likes position and power. Our generation likes position and power as well. We just view our position and power differently. We don't view our position and power through the lens of an organization or political office or anything like that. We view position and power as clout and as social media influence. It's the same thing.
Influence.
It's just manifested in a different place. But we have to be very intentional about the fact that I am who God made me to be. There's nobody else. We have to be confident in our own skin. But the tightrope that we have to walk is being confident in our own skin without being arrogant. Because we've all been guilty of saying it. I don't care who you are, if you're a leader in the workplace, in church, if you're a follower at church but a leader in the workplace, or vice versa. We've all been guilty of saying, well, I don't care, this is how I am, I don't care what they think of me. We've all said that, and there might be a little bit of truth to that, but we can't lean too much into that, because we do need to care what people think about us.
Absolutely.
And we have to be true to ourselves. So we have to be confident in our own skin, but we can't be arrogant. I think the Apostle Paul.
I think there's a fine line with that, though.
Talk a little more. I can't hear you. Maybe it's my headphones.
I think there's a very fine line in having a lot of self-confidence, but also trying not to come across as arrogant. I'm sorry. But I think in that lies your attitude.
That's right.
On that fine line of, because there's some areas that I have a lot of self-confidence that I know that I can accomplish something and do something great, but it would be my attitude that would turn it into arrogance.
That's right.
And keeping your attitude in check. But I wanted to add something about the being authentic. Being not true to yourself at the end of the day, it hurts no one but yourself.
Wow.
No one but yourself, because you're having to go to bed, honestly, that laying your head down that night as someone else. That's good.
So what you're saying is be true to yourself. You only hurt yourself when you're not true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the day, you've harmed yourself. And then if you haven't been true to yourself, not only have you harmed yourself, but it's highly likely you don't even know who you are.
Right.
If you've spent an entire day trying to be
someone else.
Absolutely.
I think you can live in an identity crisis when you get to that point. And that's a very dangerous place to be, especially spiritually. First, authenticity, true authenticity can only come from knowing who you are in God. And when you don't recognize who you are in God, then your entire view of yourself and others is going to be off. So I think being authentic, especially Dad from your generation, sometimes it can get a bad rap at my generation and people between my age and your age. And I guess some of that is for good reason. But we have to just be very careful. We have to view ourselves as God sees us and not let that become arrogance. And some people are going to think you're arrogant no matter what. Mm-hmm. So there is that flip side. But that's not, you can't let other people's perception of you affect you when they are coming from a place that's not healthy spiritually either.
Well, let me share this thought with you, and it will be perceived by some to be arrogant. People that are quite insecure in themselves find arrogance in everyone else.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because if you're true to yourself and you come across bold, if you come across confident, there's going to be somebody that day that is feeling unbold, unconfident, insecure in themselves because they're not being true and loyal to themselves. And so their own insecurities make them say this about you, that you are arrogant, when it's not arrogance in you, it's insecurities in them. You've got to be careful not to offend those people, but neither can you let their insecurities, their lack of self-confidence, their lack of self-awareness, you can't let that be a damper on who you are and what God has you to do today.
That's really good.
Yep.
Let me add one more thing. So when we talked about this a month ago, we started talking about, Dad, you mentioned that some people say, well, I want to be an authentic leader. I want to lead an authentic church, and I'm going to share all my weaknesses and my sins and have a casual approach to God, which we know that confession is biblical, to ourselves or to one another and also to God. But sometimes we say, well, come join us. We're authentic. We're real. We're not fake. We're not like all those other spiritual or like all those other religious people. And there is truth to that. The church sometimes can. I saw a reel today on Instagram that I almost shared, and I was like, nah, I better not share that. But it was so true. There's some pastor humor or church laugh or something. It said, I'm getting dressed. The caption was, I'm getting dressed for church this Sunday morning. It was a guy in a suit. and then he was putting like on a clown face, like not painting makeup, but like one like a plastic mask that like our kids wear. And so I think like there's truth in every criticism. Yeah. Like I mentioned it this past week in our Sunday morning circle before services. We don't know who's walking in here. Like people might be dressed nice and in suits and all this, but just because they're dressed nice doesn't mean that there's not issues in their life and they're covering up major sin or major hurt or major issues in their family. So there is validity to why some leaders in some churches and some church styles build based off of the term of authenticity. But the flip side of that coin is sometimes we say we're authentic and look at me, and we've all heard it, like in our attempt to be relative, and maybe we're guilty of it at times too, in our attempt to be relevant with people, we say, well, I struggled with this week. See, I'm the preacher and I'm just like you. And that's good, because preachers and ministry, every one of us at this table, even though we lead people and we have influence over people's life, we do have weaknesses and we do have temptations, and we are real, and the enemy knows how to attack us. Dad, you say it so good. He's a good devil. He knows our point of weakness. But if we're not careful, I think where you're coming from, when your perspective a month ago when we had this conversation was people who, a lot of times people who use that term authentic, they're really not meaning authentic. They're meaning, I want you to accept me for my sins and don't kick me out of ministry, or don't kick me off the stage, or don't kick me out of my pastoral role, or don't kick me off the drums. I'm just being authentic. Paul said, and this is so good, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, just go read 1st and 2nd Corinthians. Paul was so vulnerable and authentic. He said, look, we are hard pressed on every side. We are perplexed. But he listed all these truths. He listed all these points of authenticity, but he didn't say, but you have to accept me for this. He said, no, there's one step past this. There's hope past this. We're in despair, but we're not out of the fight. We're perplexed, but we're not in despair. We're persecuted, but we're not abandoned. So a lot of times today in our culture, we say, well, this is just who I am, and you have to accept me. No, this might be who you are, and we love and we do accept you. But let's move one step further past that. If we want to really be authentic, we don't accept you for who you say you are. We accept you for where you are, but also where God wants to bring you. That's true authenticity. I just preached there. I didn't mean to preach, but
mighty good, mighty good. So, with this term authentic, from my perspective, when it first started to really be a term that was being used around church things, what I was seeing a younger generation saying that they wanted to be real with the people. They wanted to be authentic. And from my perspective, they were saying, we don't want more suits. We don't want let's be more casual, and even to the point of being extremely sloppy, and many times not even very well kept. And let's appear to the Lord that way, because this is real. This is how we are. And with that, from my perspective, we were removing this thing that we call reverence. Yeah. I had a pastor talk to me on the phone this week.
Oh, that's better. I can hear you now.
And he began to say, he's coming towards Conroe Church. And if he hears this, I hope I don't disclose too much. But he said he's coming towards Conroe Church. And he said that, I'm so weary of going to church that has a good praise band, has a good choreographed lesson, but I don't feel the presence of God. But there's no anointing. And then he went over to this subject. He says, why is it that so many of these people are feeling like they need to approach church so casual that the pastor will have his this is the man's way, he'll have his starch blue jeans on, he'll have his shirt tail hanging out, his sleeves are rolled up, and he's teaching a lesson, but there's no anointing. And he said, what's missing? And I looked for an answer, and it dawned on me that it's not what the person was wearing that was an issue. Yeah. But what was missing, there was this thing of reverence that is missing in many places. So we don't live a life, we don't necessarily pursue a life of excellence because we're authentic and God's going to love us where we are. That's true. But the further up the food chain of leadership that you go, you have a greater responsibility downline. And I had a man come to me last week at the General Conference, and he was reminding me of all those Sunday morning blessings I used to do on that social media group that I've been on for a long time. Because I did it for years and years. Sunday morning at 8:15, I'd go on and say, "This is your Sunday morning blessing," and I'd just share something. And one time in that blessing, I got to talking about these pastors that just want to be first name basis with their people. And I don't guess it's wrong or it's not sinful to be a first name basis with your people, like a lot of folks call you Trent. And of my age, people call me elder, they call me bishop, they call me Brother Smith, and probably because of where I'm at in life. But I think that when people get in trouble and they need a leader, they need somebody who is authentic and real, but yet they don't need their best friend. As a parent can't be their children's best friend because it requires some authority and some discipline, neither can a spiritual leader be the best friend of the flock.
That's good.
Because if you're the best friend of the flock, they may know you. They may go on vacation with you. That they know you in all those moments. But when they need a lawyer, they're going to go to a man they've got to make an appointment to. They've got to pay $200 before they walk in the room. They've got to, and they're going to address him as Mr., and they're going to share. If they go to the doctor, they've made an appointment. They went there and waited, and there's some psychology, and you're going to someone who can help you. So when that doctor comes in, you defer to him. You treat him with respect because that's real too. Deferring, showing respect, having reverence for things is incredibly important in this idea of being authentic. And while I can accept and appreciate a younger generation saying we want to be real, so no more ties the rest of our life.
Praise God.
I think
my bad, too soon. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think what we've got to be careful from both directions.
Yes.
Is we've got to keep our reverence.
I agree.
And by keeping our reverence, we respect the things of God.
Yes.
And by creating that where we respect the things of God, you cannot respect the things of God and not respect everyone else around you.
That's good.
You cannot be filled with the Holy Ghost. You cannot respect the things of God, revere the things of God, and be condescending, or be a different person on Sunday than you are the rest of the week. And I think that's what being authentic means, is you've got to be true to God and to yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you're true to God and yourself, you are naturally going to be true to the people that's around you.
Can I flip the script?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sister Shirley, so I'm sure these are conversations that you have with your friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do y'all say about this conversation? So the question you ask us, how to be true to yourself in ministry while living in a glass house or living where everything is public. Yeah. What do you and your friends, what is y'all's philosophy? Because now, me and Kayla are now at the point to where there's a generation in leadership and ministry that are younger than us. For years, we were the youngest generation. We're not now.
They've
so
crossed
help
over.
us.
It's
a weird spot. Like it's
they
a weird
are
spot.
them. Over here, we're the young ones. On that side of the table is the old ones.
But I feel like our generation is kind of caught in between the generation before us and the generation after us.
So I think every generation goes through that phase.
Yeah.
But just our generation right now, we are the in-between. We're not the elders in the church, but we're not the rookies either. We're intermediate.
So I want communication. I want an open line of communication. I don't want any lagging going on whatsoever. Like I have all my text messages are read.
Uh-oh. Alex, she's coming at you right now.
But then as far as the authentic part, as far as the generation today, I am 100% with y'all. I get that, and being real clear across the board. So I feel like we're stuck somewhere in the middle. Does that make sense?
It does. But that also presents a golden opportunity for us to learn what from the younger generation, but also learn from the older generation.
Yeah.
And that gives us the opportunity to pass down to someone like Alex, who might not always have the access or maybe the boldness to approach someone in Dad's generation.
Right.
So you are a bridger. You are a bridge.
Yeah,
you are a bridger.
A bridger.
You're a bridge. You are the
Hey, speaking of timeout, did y'all see they rebuilt that bridge, that causeway in Florida, and like that was unbelievable, like 13 days or something? Side note, completely irrelevant, but that's amazing how quickly they rebuilt
what
that
you would have
bridge.
been, it was rebuilt by private sector.
Probably so. Probably so.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, go ahead.
So we're waiting on Sister Shirley to tell us
Oh,
what,
yeah.
what she says about our kind.
Yeah.
We gave you time to think
Okay,
about it.
so I am on like the literal line of millennial and Gen Z. I was born in 1996. So I'm the youngest of 3 siblings, so I really relate to the millennial side, but also I just graduated college. So I just graduated and I went to school with Gen Z. Like, that's also my people too. So I'm on this weird line of in the middle. But so I see this side like that you guys have come up in, but I also see that like that
I'm asking
very
you to push
casual-
back. Yes,
yeah,
push
that
back
very
on us.
casual, real, because I mean, you guys know my story. I backslid and I came back and all that, and all of that came from church hurt, and that came from church hurt in leadership. I'm gonna be really honest.
Be
so
real.
It came from church hurt in leadership, and not being that person that I could lean on. And I actually just had a conversation with Kayla a couple weeks ago. Ended up being like a 3-hour conversation. Thank you for taking that time with me. But I told her,
we need to get tissues now?
I said, Kayla, like, I want you to be my mentor. Like, I want to let you in this way. And like, it's so hard to, for me, something that I've struggled with was, I don't want you to see me differently if I let you in. And if I allow you to see basically everything, like this is what I'm going through right now.
Yeah.
And I need to reach out for help. And I think that's a huge thing that our generation has created, is, and y'all have helped pave that way, but, being real to like seek help. And I think there's a aspect of going to the right person.
Right.
Exactly.
And not being, and like you said, kind of guarding, like not being so open to where it's a struggle to find that line of, especially like working in youth ministry, of, okay, this is real. This is my story. This is what God's brought me from. But also at the same time of, there's like this worry of like, is everything going to be stripped away from me? Like, am I going to get canceled? Or
Yeah.
if I'm honest about like the things that I've done or like what I've dealt with in by myself. And that's a huge scare for me. And I know my friends and I've talked about it, and something that with authenticity that we've talked about is, excuse me, the people that are in leadership. Like, I know at Bible college, I'm an observer. I'm going to watch people that are in leadership, and I'm going to see how they are.
Sorry.
I've thankfully been allowed to be in a lot of rooms, and I like to watch people and see how they treat others, how they treat people that they don't think are anybody.
Right.
And we've talked about it. Like this summer, I was literally like a janitor at all the district events.
Which solidified the reason of why we wanted you.
Yeah.
Have you taken those duties over here yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But hang on. It's just been 2 months.
So-
There's a toilet in your future.
So I served, I'm going to say served as a nice way, but I was cleaning toilets literally. But then I had an opportunity because of y'all to sing. So I was in the green room cleaning, and then for 2 weeks I was in the green room like
Leading.
yes. And I got to see both sides of that, thankfully. And I got to observe people and kind of see how they were on and off the platform and
In the bathroom.
Or how
in
they
and out
treated
of-
you when you were on the stage and when you
Yes.
weren't on the stage.
I got to feel
The
that
same
like,
people.
firsthand.
Yeah.
The people, like the change. And I'm like, wow.
yeah.
So that's pure honesty. But you kind of, I know for me, it makes me like kind of when they are up there, I'm like, I don't really, it's hard to accept some things. Like, so it makes me realize, like, I don't ever want to be that way.
Yeah.
So it's more of like learning from, I'm going to learn from your mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but that's a huge deal for, especially Bible college students. Bible college students, like, we're in this age that we're developing who we are, and just college students in general, like that age in general. But with Bible college, you're able to be involved in a lot of things. You're able to be in a lot of rooms, thankfully. But you can kind of gauge, like, oh, yeah. People make impressions, and you're like, that's not how I want to be. So I know it's kind of rough, but you kind of learn from other people. Like, I don't want to emulate that.
One of the greatest lessons in life you'll find, there'll be people who can tell you how to a lot of time, but the greatest lessons in life are not the how-to lessons. They're the how-not-to lessons.
Yeah.
That's not how I want to do that.
Alex, you touched on something at the beginning of your remarks, and I want to hashtag circle back. So I think it's important for us to recognize that we can be real and lead with authenticity and still use discretion. Like, there is such thing as oversharing. There is such thing.
I know what that means.
Yes.
TMI.
And we're all guilty of it. Like, every single one of us. It's not that if I point a finger at somebody, I've got 3 or 4 pointing right back at me. But we can be real and still recognize, for instance, when you talk about youth ministry, you can be real with the things that you have learned and maybe share lessons you've learned from mistakes you've made without sharing the mistakes you've made. Because that's when your authenticity, that's when the glass house can get shattered really quickly. Because sometimes in our effort to be authentic, we actually, in people's minds, we don't give them this authority, but in how people receive it, we give them the license to sin. Like, oh, Alex, who's teaching on Wednesday night youth service, she struggled with this, and now look at her, God restored her. So if God restored her, I can go do the same thing, and God's going to restore me.
I think what you're saying is, when you live in a glass house, you're fearful that someone will throw a rock inside and break through and get to you. But it's very easy to be the one that's in that glass house. You've got to be careful that you don't break the glass from the inside.
Oh, that's so good, Dad.
I mean, don't say, whistle, hey, I've got a rock here, and I'm going to throw it out there to you so you can throw it at me. Okay, and you think, well, they hurt me with that. No, you gave too much information. You threw it through the glass wall, and they just tossed it back.
Wow, that's good.
And so I think we have to, there again, self-aware, respect, self-dignity, but be real. Yeah. We can't lie. I want us to also make a note that we need to come back and spend a whole time on this whole cancel culture thing in the church.
That would be very good.
Yeah.
Because it's very alive. Cancel culture is not something new. If you want to know how old cancel culture is within the church, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the men of Jerusalem chose to cancel Jesus rather than receive his message. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy for those of us that are in religious circles, to be just as uncaring and unthinking with our canceling as were those that crucified the Lord.
I want to talk about that.
We got to come back.
We can't talk about that today, but that's a good one.
I have one tidbit.
Holler at us, Pastor Kayla.
For every person that is aspiring to be in leadership, is Alex. This is just from Book of Me, but
that's a good book, Pastor Kayla.
I think every person that is going to be in leadership needs some scrubbing the toilet time. Mm-hmm. It's humbling. And it builds character. And just like you said, it lets you see of, okay, I'm going to do things different because I'm in that role up front or wherever it may be. But that time behind the scenes is what's building that leader.
But let me expand on that, because what you just said, if you're in the wrong place and you're a 35-year-old that just said that builds character, and you're a 25-year-old that just heard, well, they think that I needed my character built, so they just make me, they've just got to scrub the toilets. And so I think we've got to be very careful, because I know, and I've experienced people that were in position that will say, it'll build character. and do that nonchalantly without respect to the dignity of the person.
That's good.
And so we've got to be, and I think in last night's Bible study, how we respond to people when you have the power to break them or crush them or destroy them. They may have no power, you have all power. How do you respond to the person who cannot help you, who cannot bring something to the table for you, and you have all power in their life? And many times when you're in position, you have great power over people that are just looking to find themselves. So how do you respond in those moments? So I don't think that what Caleb was saying, well, that would just build character. At the same time, I think it'd be very simple to be that person who is in that crushing and breaking season of life, to perceive that someone just a step further down the road would say, well, they don't care either.
Yeah, I don't think a rite of passage for ministry or any type of church work or kingdom work, because face it, I think in your generation, Alex, and our generation, and even Dad, your generation now, as we transition, there's a lot of ministry that's going to be done because the world is changing so much. There's a lot of ministry that's going to be done, and it's not going to be church ministry. Dad, you lead a nonprofit. We've got friends in the music industry, friends in fashion. There's a lot of light and darkness that's going to be cast, and it's going to be ministry, but it's not going to be from a church staff. But regardless, I think it's very important that we go back and kind of say, well, if you're not willing to scrub a toilet, it's not that you have to scrub a toilet or vacuum a floor or blow off a parking lot or mow a yard or whatever it is. That's not the rite of passage for ministry. But the mentality that I will do whatever is asked of me, if it is that is a rite of passage.
When Joseph arrived at the palace, he spent years holding a toilet brush.
Yep.
Okay. But he never threw away that toilet brush. And when he stood there in judgment of his brothers, he still held a toilet brush in one. He held a scepter in one hand, but he never lost his toilet brush.
He said, I'll serve you. Yeah.
And so I think that any of us, when we go beyond the fact that we can be a servant to others, if we're too big to serve, we've gotten too big for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So good.
But I think that we've got to remember carefully that this process of being true to ourselves, this process of being real, this process of respecting from generation to generation, having one hand extended here and one hand where you're clinging and reaching for those that are ahead of you, but yet you're not making the journey alone. You're bringing the next generation with you. That's where y'all are right now. This is an incredible thing, and I think it's been an incredible few moments that we've spent together.
You have one more question, Alex? Or how long have we been going? Yeah, what time is it?
I think we're running out of time today.
You got to go. Okay. We have an important person on the podcast that has multiple appointments in one day, unlike us. Oh, that's awesome.
I have one thing to ask,
okay,
or one thing to say.
Do it.
No.
But I will say, like, I felt like the art of like the mentorship has kind of gone away, and it's trying to come back. I have noticed that, but like, that is one thing that I will never take for granted is the investment that y'all have put into my life. And it's made me, I was raised in a family that like we did anything and everything that possible in the church, whatever was, we were always at the church, but I wasn't raised in like a minister's home, like in a glass house or a pastor's home or anything like that. So I'm learning as I go. And so having this relationship with y'all, and a lot of questions that I have don't make it to the podcast, but I'm able to just, sit there and ask questions to y'all, and y'all are very honest and upfront, and I wanted to publicly thank y'all, but I wish in the church that this was more common. I feel like I don't know if it seems like we don't care, but for my generation, sometimes I think we're looking for that leadership and we're looking for that mentorship, and it's an awkward conversation. Like, how do you reach out? How do you start that up? You know what I mean? And it's almost like, well, they wouldn't be interested in doing that with me. And so it's kind of like that builds that authenticity. And I've been able to like see multiple sides of y'all, because being in rooms like with y'all, and family night and things like that. But still y'all are authentic, yeah, no matter where you are. But there are times where you're like, you can let your guard down a little bit.
I hope that we as a ministry never lose that willingness to touch young people. I know today I am meeting with a young man that is basically has opened himself up to becoming mentoring relationship, and I'm leaving that meeting, and I'm going to meet a man that's in his 70s that's doing that for me still. And so back to back, I'm going to be between one that's reaching towards me and one that I guess I'm still reaching toward, because we can never lose that. We can never, ever lose that.
Right. So how would you suggest someone reaching out? Like how would you approach that? That's, I guess, what I was leading up to is how do you approach, I mean, because I feel like I didn't reach out to y'all, but I did at the same time. Y'all really kind of, I mean, I'm the type of person that you kind of have to grab a hold of me and be like, okay, I want to be in your life. Like Kayla told me the other day, she was like, I get through walls, Alex. And I was like, yeah.
I am a wall breaker. I specialize in breaking walls.
But there's people who are threatened. There's people in position that are threatened that their walls might tumble.
Yeah.
Got to be careful.
Yeah.
Go ahead, wall breaker. Tear it
so
down.
that is something that we as a team have literally just decided together that we're going to reach the generation underneath us, because
hashtag ascend young adult.
Well, I was going to say that we had Young Leaders thing last year that has grown now into Ascend conference because of your burden to bring somebody on this journey with you.
Yeah. So we felt like at your age, we didn't have much of that.
Right.
And so that is just something that we have said we are going to do different. You know, if it takes us reaching the whole world, just us two, we're going to do it, or at least attempt to. But I think for you to feel comfortable in saying, okay, yeah, I have these 20 feet walls built around me, I don't want to just pour them out to you right away. I think us as leaders, we have to be approachable. Mm-hmm. And it goes beyond, hey, how are you doing?
Yes.
It goes, you know, what'd you do today? Or how did your day go yesterday? It goes beyond just that formal, how are you doing? It requires more of us.
Yes. It requires both sides being willing to have a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because if you're going to be in a relationship, you begin to trust. You trust up, and there's got to be trust down. And so you talk, I mean, you get together, you drink coffee, you learn a little bit about each other, and then this relationship builds, and the more it builds, then you're willing to say, I can let them closer in, and you begin to share. And vice versa. The leader, the older person, the mentor, mentoree, however how that works, the one who is probably further down the road. The one further down the road has got to be willing to have that relationship too. Mm-hmm. Younger people desire it. The older people don't necessarily feel a need for it. Mm-hmm. But the need for that relationship with them and within them is more important than we think.
I think very practically, Alex, though, so we met you because you led a team that was here from TBC leading worship. Or I don't know if you led that team or you were on that team.
On it, yeah.
And so that's how we initially met you. And then I think we were at a service in Beaumont that I was leading. And I remember we got in the car that night. We were going to eat with the speaker and some of our friends that were there. And Kayla said, did you see Alex? Do you remember Alex? And I said, yeah, I saw her. And she said, she came up to me and said, like, you had a conversation, like, I'm going to come to your church. I want to shadow you for Sunday.
And I was so terrified to do that. I was like, I really like them. And I was like, they're not even going to remember who I am.
No, we did.
And it's that like letting go of your pride thing. Like, and sorry, you can continue, but I was so scared to do that. And I was like, no, you know what, Alex, like, just go say hi to them. And it was at a conference or a hyphen night.
Yeah,
or something.
yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a two-way street.
Right.
You have to take initiative, but also because there's an ethical boundary here, and that's a whole other conversation. But you took initiative, and we also, once you took the initiative, we jumped at the opportunity because we had already noticed you and had conversation, but because of other things, we wanted to be very careful and protect that. But you had the boldness to approach us, and then we began that conversation, and look where we're at today. So the practical way to do it is be bold. Like, this might not be for a 25-year-old. This might be a 35-year-old that's wanting to start a business or wanting to change industries and doesn't know how to do it. Be bold and send the email. Be bold and approach that professional at the conference or at the convention. Be bold. The worst thing that can happen is it not work out, and guess what? You're still going to be all right, because if you have the desire and the want to, you'll find the opportunity. I think we're over our time.
What an authentic conversation about being authentic to people.
Also, hey, thanks everybody for listening or watching. Most people listen, but thanks everybody for tuning in to this episode of Hope for the Soul. And I hope this conversation was honest and you got to see beyond just people sitting around a table talking in a microphone. But we hope this empowered you and equipped you and made you better. So thanks everybody for listening.